Oh, alright. Not what I allowed for, but is the repopulated mainboard. I replaced components for a couple of reasons. What I did was replace components that were out of spec. So when I say out of spec, I mean out of tolerance. That was one reason. Another reason was there was physical evidence that they were probably going to go south sometime soon. Like on the ends of these caps, there's cracks in the enamel there. So in my experience, they do that, and then not that long after of heavy usage, they start leaking, and sometimes they catastrophically fail. In, for example, like a main suppression application, something like that, they'll just catch fire. So that's another reason. Another reason was that the values that were existing on this board I didn't want to use in the finished build. So for example, the section over here that was modified by whoever to try and make sort of a Marshall-y type channel, this has been reverted back to the stock values. So we've gone with metal film for the preamp stage plate loads, just to reduce the amount of hiss. If the form factor of the, where the leads have been cut worked and they were still in tolerance and they were not a critical position noise-wise, like the cathode resistors there, I've reused them. Over here we changed stuff from the stock setup, so we replaced them. This had the 470 ohm on the reverb, which just kills 12A AT7s for the drivers. I've used some new Vichy nice quality ceramics where I needed to replace them. There was evidence on the ceramic caps here in the trem oscillator that the leads have been bent quite a bit, and the enamel, or whatever you call it, had like chipped off, and that could potentially allow moisture into the cap as well as just being generally weak because it's been bent back and forth a dozen times over the years. So I replaced them with some nice Panasonic film caps there. Tested the roach and it seems to be okay, so we've reused that, but I do have spares if that gives us any issues. This output area, so the phase inverter, that's the tail, and the plate loads there, and the bias feed resistors there, that was all part of the previously done mods. That 470 was reading pretty heavily out, so that was the original carbon comp, so I changed that with the metal film as well. And I ended up having some 0.1s that were in the phase inverter coupling stage that would have worked, but the leads weren't up to the job. They didn't make the length between the two eyelets. So instead of tacking stuff on, I don't want any tack soldered stuff in this amp. I want everything to be, the component leads, and that's it. That is getting more difficult over the years as this length here stays constant in the old amps, and the new components, their leads are getting shorter and shorter. Often they'll come with just like 10-12 mil leads, so you've got to be careful of that when you order it. If you've got a data sheet that's detailed enough to specify how the leads come from the factory, you need to read that, because you might order caps for this application and the leads don't reach. So now I've got some areas that are still unpopulated. I'm yet to decide exactly which way we're going to go. If we're going to go with like the master volume as it were, or are we going to use that switch for like the pull out switch on the master volume pot? Could we implement that for something else instead of the boost that no one uses? So I'm going to pull out all the schematics and decide which way we're going to go. Maybe give the customer a ring and say, look, do you use this? Do you want something else that might be more useful, like maybe different amounts of feedback? You might be able to switch between silver face and black face feedback networks, so you can go the really clean or the slightly less so. So I need to sit down, have a think about that, scratch the head for a while, and decide which way to go forwards. So onto the filter cap board. You can see how clean everything is now. Isn't that a beautiful thing? The green of the Vichy resistors there, combined with the tube amp doctor caps. Every time we install a cap, I put the values facing upwards so the next tech can see what they are. I might get a texture and write on one of the caps what date the thing was recapped. I've never really done that before, but that's probably something I should start doing. Having said that, in this area, chances are if this comes back to a tech in 20 years, it's probably going to be me. So we've siliconed them down. After cleaning the wax off the board, they're actually pretty solid now. They're actually stuck to the board, whereas before, whoever tried to silicon those two Jamicons, they didn't clean off the wax first, and of course nothing sticks to wax except wax itself. I put 2 new metal film, a bit of an overkill there. They're 3 waters. I think that's all I had in stock in the 220K, but they look pretty and they're not going to overheat, so that's good. And there's the bottom view, all nice and clean, and the backing boards nice and schmicko now too. So we'll reinstall them and then get towards reassembly, and then go have a little bit of a cry about how long it's all taking. And here's the new bias board. Note that the rectifiers there, we've only got 2 1N4007s now instead of the 6 RCA, what are they? RCA 35604s. I couldn't find a data sheet on those old little buggers, but from memory I think they're only 200 volts, so they used 3 in series on each side to reach a peak inverse voltage of 600 volts. So these are rated at 1000 volts. So no need for that. The only reason I've put these links here is because the wires were a little bit stretched going all the way over to here, but they can easily reach here. So we'll ignore these eyelets. We'll just solder the transformer straight to these connections here, and then that continues to the reservoir cap. I'm going to change it to overall bias adjustment with a trim pot piggybacked on the back of the original balance pot, so that allows you to adjust the overall bias as well as the balance between the 2 valves for maximum convenience. Here's the just pigtail hanging off there that will get mounted to the chassis, and there is the bias tap from the transformer. And again, I've just thrown a little bit of silicone under that cap to stop anything from jiggling around. The only thing jiggling when this amp's playing should be your ass, or your mama's ass. One thing with the old wax boards is you go through the filters on the desolder gun pretty quickly because it gets filled with all the wax vapor from the board. So you got to clean that off probably 2 or 3 times during a major job. A bit of isopropyl and new filter element. Got a few there. It's at like 50, and she's good as new. Now you can just imagine what would happen if all that stuff ended up in the pump itself. You'd be changing the vanes pretty often. This part just clips on there. Makes an airtight seal. And back on the machine she goes. So now we're going to get back onto the chassis. It doesn't look too bad at a distance, but there's quite a bit of grunge on the inside there, and you can see what the wax has done to the plating. That was a big pool of wax under the insulating board, and it's eaten through the plating pretty much. So just going to do what we can to clean it up. I'm going to remove the switches and stuff to just gain access. It's a bit tight in there. Clean all the valve sockets from the rear and the front, and there's just like a layer of grunge that's just sort of collected on everything. So we're going to get in there and just with a bit of solvent clean that up with a long bristle brush and drain it off and let it dry thoroughly before we start reinstalling anything at all, or reworking these grounds over here, which will be the next thing to do after that. Oh, fucking awesome. I've just gone to solder some stuff to the valve sockets, and the shit Fender sockets, they're just snapping off with a little bit of pressure. They've probably been bent back and forth 50 times over the course of this thing's hacked up life. So an amp like this, really, it's only worthwhile restoring if you get the fucking thing for free, because there's no profit in this. Trust me. Man, I am trying not to swear as much on this channel for you delicate fucks, but days like this really test me. You gotta laugh or you'll cry. So I spoke to the customer and he's watched the first video and he was pretty happy with the detail on going into things, and he wants to spend the money to make this thing bulletproof. So we are putting some new Beltons in, and there goes my afternoon, but it's okay. We'll just get on with it, eh? You know, sometimes they say things happen for a reason. I didn't spot this before, but you've got dry heater solder joints there as well. And that wire is probably just going to pull straight out. Yep. So that's another thing that will set our mind at ease, that we've definitely addressed, like totally addressed that issue. Well, at least I get to get rid of the sockets that I don't like. You can see there how deep the contacts are down inside those pins, those pinholes. They're just pretty shit sockets. Very thin gauge steel they're made out of, and the pins are made out of extremely thin gauge steel. So we'll put some nice Beltons in there. It's one less thing we've got to worry about. Now, because Beltons have that little shoulder there on the bottom there, you put them in, they don't go all the way in. Now you can either drill all the holes out, which is a bit traumatic at that large diameter with a cone drill or step drill, get shavings everywhere, or you can just chuck a washer under there, or a nut or something just as a spacer, and that's what I'm going to do. Before we put them in, well, we've got a bit of working space there. We'll clean up the surrounding chassis with some naphtha. There was a little bit of grime on the chassis there, but now it's nice and clean. You can see it. It's come off on the paper there. Alright, so I've calmed down a bit now. I've seen those beautiful Beltons in place, so let's take a deep breath and wire them up. Now you can just feel, bending these terminals, how much heavier they are. Much more sturdy, trustworthy. It's actually hurting a little bit to push them over. So that looks like good, like probably 1mm thick metal. I think they're steel plated by how hard they are. And you compare that with these flimsy things, it's just no competition at all. A couple of bends and they just snap off. Yeah, it's even bending where it's you know, where the eyelet is, it just folds over on itself. No effort at all. So glad to see them gone. Oh my god, do they need to put 5 kilometers of saran wrap on the cable? Ah! Honestly, I think these companies are just trolling me at this point. So yes, sometimes it's a pain in the ass buying wire from DigiKey, but this stuff's great. Just doesn't melt, bro. So you can rework the stuff, and your jacket, you don't have to cut a bit of jacket off each time like you do with the cheap ass PVC wiring. And just to show I'm not bullshitting you, here's some solder. So that stuff, there's the code. I think it's approaching end of line, so I grabbed another 100-foot roll, because the brown and blue is great for either usually the primary transformer colours or our mains colours, where brown is active and blue is neutral here in Australia and several other countries. Alright, I'm glad that's out of the way, and now I need a beer. And I'm going to do some fine tuning on this thing and then do some testing, and next time you see it, I'll go over everything that was done in excruciating detail, and then you can suffer my dodgy Hank Marvin riffs as I crank this thing up and have a listen. So thanks for putting up with my whinging. Not every amp is this painful, but as long as it leaves here and is absolutely bulletproof, I want this thing to be a tank, I'll be happy no matter how many hours I spend on it. So I'll just bear in mind, and you bear in mind too, champions, that getting old fenders like this that are this bad condition, watch the first video for reference. You're pretty much only going to make $1 on them if you're trying to flip them, if you're getting the amp for free in its current state. And even then, it's borderline with the cost of valves and stuff, and if you've got a transformer or something, it's game over. So yeah, it's kind of not a way to make money flipping these things anymore, especially when they're this abused. They need to be pristine. So I'll talk to you on the next one, and you know, hold tight. I'm struggling to find time to even get the repairs out the door, let alone edit the videos, so patience is virtue and whatnot. I'll talk to you then.